Hey YouTube, Full Throttle here with a new video. So yeah, I'm gonna do a little weekly video every Sunday, hopefully. Maybe I'll put down something every Saturday instead of a Sunday. It depends on, so like if I don't have something for Sunday, then I'll have something for Saturday at least. So yeah, here's a new deck profile. After this, I'm going to probably on Wednesday, so expect something in the week of sort of a deck analysis, sort of a what to do with your G-Zone when you play the deck. Okay, so let's get right into the deck profile right now. Alright, so for the grade 1s, we run as our starter, Machining Little B. This is pretty obvious starter choice. So yeah, we run it because it's the only machining starter. If they get a new machining starter, then yeah, it's gonna be, yeah, that would be the next priority. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Then we run 4 copies of Machining Bombix. It's the heal trigger for machinings. You know, pretty obvious stuff. Pretty simple, pretty standard. Just a machining heal trigger. You run it because it's machining, and it's a heal trigger. 4 Machining Firefly. It's Counterblast 1 when it's placed on the rear guard circle. If you have a Machining Vanguard, you can pay the cost, and if you do, choose one of your other rear guards, stand it, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, and that unit can't stand. So you stand one of your rear guards, and then you stun one of your opponents. Pretty easy stuff. It's just a better version of Worker Ant. You don't run Worker Ant because Worker Ant doesn't have Forerunner. Then 4 Machining Scorpion. It's machining critical trigger. No explanation needed. And then 4 Machining Scarab. It's a machining trigger, which is what's important. You want to run all machinings as your grade 0s. And Machining Scarab is good, especially because against control, you really need this, because you really need draws against control, because the deck doesn't care what it draws, just that it draws machinings. Like, it doesn't care about the quality of the machining, it just cares of the quantity of machinings. So that's important. Alright, so let's get into the grade 1s. Alright, so for the grade 1s, we run 4 copies of Rebel Mutant Star Shield. This is a perfect card that countercharges if you have another copy of it in the drop zone. So yeah, pretty standard stuff. This is a pretty good card. You want to run this in machining because you can then countercharge your machining a special counterblast. You could run Paralyzed Madonna if you wanted to. I'm personally not a fan of it because only really 2 decks really rely on hitting the rear guard, and even then Dismal just kind of does the job for it. Then we run 4 copies of Machining Black Soldier. It's 10k attacker. Reason I don't run Hornet is because Hornet is vanilla most of the game. And this is not vanilla most of the game. So this can actually create decent columns with the next card up, which is Machining Caucasus. Machining Caucasus, I run 4 of it because it's a good card, and most of the deck can hit magic numbers with a 6k booster, so you don't really, doesn't really matter. And then when the attack hits a Vanguard that this boosted, if you have a machining that this boosted a machining unit, you can then choose one of your opponent's rear guards and stun it. So yeah, pretty good, because then that puts more on-hit pressure, because the deck already has quite a bit of on-hit pressure. Because then you can just make every column pressure except for your Vanguard, and your Vanguard can get crits, so your opponent doesn't want any of that to happen, which is always good. And then 2 copies of New Face Mutant Little Dorcas. Reason I don't run like, I don't know, a machining instead of this is because the deck really likes striding, so you want to increase stride consistency a lot. So yeah, that's why I run this over maybe another machining, so like Locust or Mosquito or even Hornet, because this thing just does better for the deck. So yeah, on to the grade 2s. Alright, so for the grade 2s, we run 4 copies of Machining Mosquito Mark II. It is our best grade 2, probably one of our best cards in the deck. It is, during your turn, if you have a Vanguard with machining in its card name, and if all of your opponent's rear guards are rested, this is important, they have to all be rested. So that means that, well, it's if all your opponent's units are rested, the skill is active, and if you have a machining Vanguard, it gets plus 2,000 power until the end of the turn during your turn, and it gets the skill when its attack hits, you can choose one of your other rear guards, stand it, and then choose one of your opponent's rear guards and stun it. This is great because that means you could get multi-attack in, and multi-attack is always good. Alright, so then we also run 4 copies of Machining Red Soldier. Self-explanatory, it's a 12k attacker. The deck is a beatdown rush deck that turns into a snowball grind deck after a bit, after turn 3, so yeah, it's pretty good. Because then you can just put a Caucasus behind this, and it's an 18k column for cheap. And then 3 Machining Tarantula. Now, I haven't seen a lot of people on YouTube use Machining Tarantula, so I'm going to explain my reason why. I run Tarantula because it is well, first up, its ability is on the Vanguard circle or the rear guard circle. You can counterblast a machining, so it's in a special counterblast, and then when its attack hits a Vanguard, if you have a Mega Colony Vanguard, you may pay the cost, and if you do, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, and that unit cannot stand during the opponent's end phase. So it's counterblast 1 on hit for a stun. That's more on hit pressure, and since you can just have the magic numbers with, for example, Black Soldier, yeah, pretty good. And it's that the reason I run it is because you can then you can stun on turn 2, so then your opponent's gonna have something stunned, and if you stun like a Tidal Assault, then it's amazing, because your opponent can't really do anything against a Tidal when their Tidal Assault is stunned, so they can't snowball you. They can't just beat you down because of that move, so yeah, you're able to really get off some great combos with this. So yeah, and it's a great ride, and it's also a decent enough rear guard, and it's not vanilla most of the game, like Mantis or Papilio. Papilio is the on-calls 8k stunner rear guard. Definitely better than Armor Beetle, because Armor Beetle's a bad card. Well, at least in machining. Darkface, it's more debatable. I prefer other cards over Armor Beetle, but this is for machinings. I'll go over Darkface deck in a later time. I'll probably also do updates on both this deck and Darkface after the technical booster comes out, so expect that. Alright, so that's it for the grade 2s. Now on to the grade 3s. So for the grade 3s, we run 4 copies of Machining Stag Beetle. You need this in any machining deck. Machinings love Stag Beetle. If you're not running a Stag Beetle in a machining deck, I'm going to be honest, it's a bad machining deck if you don't run Stag Beetle in it, because it's really the best machining grade 3 you have. It's great. It's 10k base, sure, but that doesn't really matter because your opponent's stuff is getting stunned all the time, so they're just going to be wasting resources just to hit your 10k, which isn't really as relevant anymore. And then the ability of, when it's placed on the Vanguard circle, choose up to 2 Mega Colony cards with machining in their name, call them from the soul as rest, and then this gets the total power of the original power of both of the called units. Doesn't really matter though, because what you're going to be doing after this is striding into something that's going to be shown a bit later, which machining is very infamous for. And then we have 3 copies of Machining Warsickle. So Machining Warsickle, the reason I don't run 4 is just because I'm too lazy to get a 4th, and it's not that it affects the deck too much. 4 Warsickle is better. 4 Warsickle is definitely better, but this is just a little bit of a personal flair and a little personal reasoning. Warsickle is Counterblast 2, Limit Break. At the end of the battle that is attacked, if it didn't hit, then you can stun your opponent's Vanguard. And then the other skill is Counterblast 1 Machining. When it's placed on the Vanguard circle, you may pay the cost, and if you do, choose a card from your soul with machining in its name, and then you call it to rearguard as rest. So it's good because it has the on-ride effect that Machining Stag Beetle has, but not as good as it, but you know, it's still a good card. It's a great card though. And then we run one copy of Machining Scorpion Mark II. The reason why I run this is a little personal stuff. It's that I just like the artwork, to be honest, and I like the artwork, and I like how it has the Legion ability. I only run one because I don't want to ride into it every game. This is just when the game gets really grindy. I'm never going to be using its Legion skill, but the fact that it can send cards back is great, because then I can just sack harder, which is always good. It's Legion with Machining Mosquito Mark II, and then act once per turn, counterblast 1, choose Persona Blast either this or the mate. When it's in Legion, choose up to 3 cards with Machining in its card name from your soul, call them to separate rearguard circles as rest. Then this gets the total power. So like Machining Stag Beetle, but not as good because it's Counterblast 1, which is not good. And then its other ability is Act Vanguard Circle. Once per turn, choose one of your rear guards with Machining in its card name, put it into your soul, stand one of your rear guards, and stun one of your opponents. So it's not a very good card. But I just run it for the Legion ability because, I mean, like, you're not going to be using its other skills, but I mean, you may as well just run it for the fact that it's Legion, and if you can't stride that turn, you at least have something to put back cards, which is always good. And you have something to hit high numbers every turn for sometimes, which is also good. Okay, so now on to the grade 4s. So with the grade 4s, we run, obviously, our 4 copies of Machining Destroyer. You're gonna need this guy in every machining deck. This guy is so important. He's such a good card. You should be running him. There's no reason to not run him in machining unless it's bad. Because like a machining deck without Destroyer is bad, to be honest, because machinings need Destroyer. That's what makes machinings good. So yeah, it's Counterblast to Machining, and then stun. If you have a heart card with Machining in its card name, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and stun that card during. And then if the number of rear guards you have with Machining in its card name is 4 or more, then choose one of your opponent's rear guards, and that unit cannot stand during your opponent's next stand phase. So, well, no, Vanguards. So it's stun a rear guard, and if you have 4, and then in addition, if you have 4 or more rear guards with Machining in their card name, stun your opponent's Vanguard. From what I recall, it actually is that you can, and then the and then is not in addition to you have to stun that. It's due to the do as much as you can rule. You don't have to have stunned something. If your opponent has no board other than their Vanguard, you can still stun your opponent's Vanguard because of the do as much as you can rule. Because, for example, Shotgun Blow Dragon, not a very relevant card, but its ability is relevant as a reasoning for why this can be used if your opponent has no rear guards, because of the do as much as you can rule in Vanguard. You just, for example, if a skill says retire 2 of your opponent's rear guards and then gain a critical if you have more rear guards than your opponent, if your opponent only has 1 rear guard, you just do as much as you can. This is stun and a rear guard and then stun. This is stun a rear guard and stun a Vanguard if you have 4 or more Machining rear guards. That's a do as much as you can. You can stun your opponent's Vanguard if they don't have a rear guard. So yeah, that may have been a little tricky wording. So yeah, but just clearing that up. And then we run 1 copy of Wildfire Mutant Deity Staggle-Dipper. Staggle-Dipper is a really good card for the deck because it is the deck's only finisher and the only way to unflip another card that's in this G-Zone that requires a Persona flip but is on hit. I'll go over that in a bit. It's Counterblast 1, choose a face down card from your G-Zone, turn it face up, and then choose 3 of your units. They all get plus 1,000 power for each of your opponent's rested units. So if your opponent's in Legion and they have a full field in rest, and that means that this gives a plus 7,000 power to your opponent's, well, to 3 units. So that's a total plus 21,000 power spread across your board, which is awesome. And then 18,000 if it's not Legion and it's filled, or if it's Legion, it's 4 rear guards. So yeah, it's a pretty good card. And then 1 copy of Rain Element Madu. Madu is a card that you really should be using in machining because of Stag Beetle. Because sometimes you just want to stride and then stride again the next turn, because if you don't have the rear guards for a destroyer, then which would be kind of odd, but if you don't, then you stride into Madu so that you can stride again the next turn if you only have 1 stride fodder. So yeah, and then, or to get back another Stag Beetle or a War Sickle, so that next turn you could ride again and then call something out. So it's good for that. And then 2 copies of Paraspear. Well, so Madu is, when it's placed on the Vanguard circle, if you have a heart card with 10,000 or less power, choose a grade 3 from your drop zone and put it in your hand. So yeah, it's Cray Elemental also. Then Paraspear is, when this is placed on the Vanguard circle, rest all of your opponent's units, not stun them, rest them. So it doesn't stun anything, but then it has the ability of, then if and then draw, and then if the amount of opponent's rested units, so this in this state of rest is 3 or more, then draw a card and it gets plus 5,000 power until the end of the turn, which is good because that's draw power for the deck, which is why I run 2. I could switch between which to run at 2, this or this, because I have 5 copies of Staggle Dipper, so I have no shortage. I have 5 copies in my collection because I had bought 5 boxes and I got 5 Onibibu Radar, 5 of this, and 5 copies of Christos. So yeah, don't have a shortage of Fighters Collection stuff, except for Dark Irregulars. So then 4 copies of Force Spear Mutant Deity Stun Beetle. This is the reason that Staggle Dipper is good. Well, one of the reasons that Staggle Dipper is good, because this is Counterblast 2 on hit, flip another Persona Flip, on hit, stun your opponent's Vanguard for the cost of Counterblast 2 and Persona Flip, Generation Break 2, and then your opponent can't stand their Vanguard, so it stuns the Vanguard, and it also makes the opponent's Vanguard unable to normal ride during their next ride phase. So yeah, the problem with this is it's on hit, so you really have to time it right. You have to know when your opponent has nothing to block it. So yeah, if your opponent's really burned through most of their perfect cards, you go into Stun Beetle. So that's a good reason. So yeah, and then we run, for our G guards, 2 copies of Dismal. The reason I don't run Screw is because the deck just loves having machines in hand, so discarding. I personally don't like Screw, and the reason I don't run Sebreeze is because the deck doesn't use any Generation Break cards, so Sebreeze doesn't really matter, because the deck has its other ways of punishing Great Stall. So yeah, so then this is, I've gone through this in the last video. It's resist from the Guardian Circle, and then when it's placed on the Guardian Circle, choose one of your rear guards, and it, until end of turn, that can't be hit. That unit cannot be hit or chosen by effects. So yeah, so the only stuff that can actually deal with it is AoE. So like Tempest Bolt or Armor Break Dragon, but Armor Break Dragon activates at a different time. And then 2 copies of Scarab Gas. The reason I run 2 Scarab Gas is because I just kind of fell in love with the card. It's a great card. It's when it guards, if the amount of your opponent's rested units is 2 or more, gets plus 5,000 shield. That's the second easiest G guard to activate aside from Enigman Patriot. This is such an easy card to activate the conditions for that it's insane. So yeah, it's great. So yeah, that's really just such a good card. It's such a good card that you should run 2 in every Mega Colony deck because you want to use this. So yeah, now into the overview about the deck. Yeah, as an overview of the deck's got some combos. I'll just go over the most simple one in this video because I'm going to go over a few more complex choices with the deck afterwards. So yeah. So for example, say you are ridden into, so say turn 1 you rode this, and turn 2 you rode Tarantula, and then you have your little bee right here. So yeah, so then the reason you run Stag Beetle is for this reason. Because then you ride, Stag Beetle skill goes off, you call this and this, and then after that you then stride. So you stride and then into Destroyer, and then you call something from your hand. So like a Mosquito Mark II, and then Mosquito Mark II is there. So then you, and then if you can get another thing to call, like a Caucasus, and you call that too, so call it Caucasus. For this, you usually can do, you can go for a more risky play of doing that and then hoping that that hits, so then you can restand, or you can do this to hopefully get triggers for bigger numbers. Your opponent perfect guards this, they're going to have to let something hit. So then this is going to stun. So if they're at 4 damage, you're in a winning position because then your opponent can't stop this whole thing. Because then it's attack, and then they have to either risk getting hit by a crit, or they have to lose 2 of their rear guards and have something of yours restand. So yeah, great card. So that's why this is a great card. And then, yeah, so it's just a pretty good card. So yeah, that's sort of the basic stuff for the deck. I'll go over the rest of it in the next video. That'll probably be coming out hopefully this Wednesday. I'll start recording probably today or tomorrow, but it's gonna take a few days. So yeah, this is Full Throttle signing out. Bye.